Good morning and welcome to the King County Bar Foundation's annual Breakfast with Champions. I'm Kelly Noonan. I'm the managing shareholder of Stokes Lawrence, and I am the president of the King County Bar Foundation. Today I am pleased to be serving as Master of Ceremonies. Long before I was involved with the King County Bar Foundation, the Breakfast with Champions was my favorite fundraising event. The speakers were inspiring and thought-provoking, and the room was filled with friends and colleagues. Most importantly, the money raised at the breakfast provides a legal safety net to 10,000 of our neighbors every year through pro bono programs. Funds raised also help to diversify the legal profession through dozens of scholarships for minority law students. While we would all prefer to see each other in person this morning, I promise today's program will inspire and inform. And with your generosity, we will raise essential funds for the huge demand in pro bono services we expect as the pandemic comes to an end and the restrictions on evictions are lifted. I know I'm not alone in being inspired by the King County Bar's programs. Most of you are already believers in our work. For those who are new to this event, I predict you'll be a believer before our program ends this morning. Now, I have a few housekeeping duties before we hear from our featured speakers this morning. First, you will notice an orange button on the top right of the Give Butter page you are viewing. Click the orange button at any time to make your donation. A group of especially generous law firms and businesses have sponsored today's program. Their underwriting of this event means that 100% of all contributions made today will support our programs. First, a very special thank you to our $10,000 diamond sponsors: Amazon, Microsoft, and Perkins Coie. Thank you to our $5,000 platinum sponsors: Baker Hostetler, Cairncross and Hempelman, Davis Wright Tremaine, Helsel Fetterman, and Starbucks. Many thanks to our $4,000 titanium sponsors: K&L Gates and Preg O'Donnell and Gillette. Thank you as well to our $3,000 gold sponsors: Buckhalter, Fox Rothschild, Gordon Thomas Honeywell, Hilliard Dispute Resolution, Immix Law, Inslee Best, Jams, Lane Powell, Lasher Hulsoffel, McNall Ebel, Miller Nash Graham and Dunn, Oric, Pacifica Law Group, Stoll Reeves, Stokes Lawrence, and U.S. Bank. Many thanks to our silver, bronze, and emerald sponsors whose names are now appearing on your screen. This past year has been difficult for many of our usual sponsors, so we weren't sure what to expect when we reached out to ask for support for this year's program. The response has been tremendous. We are truly grateful for the generosity of the firms and businesses who support the work of the foundation. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We are delighted to welcome the deans of the schools of law at Seattle University and the University of Washington, Annette Clark and Mario Barnes. I would also like to recognize the boards of the King County Bar Foundation and Association for their leadership in promoting today's event and guiding our profession. The names of all board members are listed in your program. And finally, I would like to recognize the committee that planned the event this year. Not only was planning more difficult than usual due to the pandemic, it was complicated by the fact that we did not have an executive director during most of the planning process. A list of all committee members is in your program, But I would like to give special recognition to two people for their impressive efforts in bringing this morning's event together. First, Scott Collins, who chaired the breakfast committee, and secondly, Ann Daly, interim executive director of the King County Bar Association. Okay, we now have the pleasure of moving into the part of our program where you will meet the organization's new executive director and where we will shine a spotlight on one of the pro bono programs your donations today will support. First up is our new King County Bar Association Executive Director, Dua Abudiab. Before joining the King County Bar Association, Dua was a public defender with the King County Department of Public Defense. Dua has represented indigent clients in civil commitment court, district court, and superior court. Before that, Dua worked as a Colorado State public defender. She received her JD from South Texas College of Law in Houston and has a biochemistry degree from Texas A&M. Now you will get to meet Dua directly.
My name is Dua Abudiab, and I am the new executive director at the King County Bar. From a young age, I learned and I realized that helping people was the reason I existed. And now, stepping into an incredible role where we're actually affecting thousands of lives every day. That opportunity is once in a lifetime for someone who was a line attorney for 8.5 years. And it's this chance to bring our community together. It's our chance to highlight all the good work that's being done. And it's a chance for me to live my passion every day. And it's just unreal. I was a biochemistry major in college, which not the traditional path for an attorney, but I didn't want to work in a lab my whole life. So public defense was the only thing I was interested in the actual practice of law. And it was a chance for me to represent what's traditionally known as the underdog. And I can't explain the feeling and the sense of accomplishment and reward that you experience when that happens. What I would love to see the King County Bar do is find that passion, find that compassionate drive and that dedication to be the organization that is on the front lines of being that anti-racist group, of increasing diversity in our legal community, and of fighting inequities in every field that we work on. KCBF's mission is justice, professionalism, and service. And I think we can do that thanks to the constant support that we get. I'd ask folks to consider where you are, whether you're at work, whether you're at home. Recognize the opportunities and the privileges that you have had, and realize that this event, this organization is committed to helping folks that don't have those opportunities. I want the community to see the King County Bar as an example of an amazing place to work, an amazing place to volunteer, a place that dedicates itself, its services, its team to helping those that can't help themselves. And at the end of the day, that camaraderie that we've all missed during this pandemic. And I hope folks realize how important that is and how, as much as we need you, you need the King County Bar.
Thank you, Dua. We are fortunate to have you as our new executive director. A reminder, at any time during the program, you can click on the Donate Now button on the top right portion of the Give Butter website. If you prefer, you can donate directly on the foundation website at www.kcbf.org/donate. I encourage you to donate as much as possible. For the lawyers watching, please consider donating as much as 1 hour of your regular billable rate. The pro bono program we are spotlighting this morning is our Housing Justice Project. I am very proud to tell you that thanks to the efforts of Edmund Witter, the person you will be hearing from next, Governor Inslee just last week signed into law a groundbreaking bill that establishes the nation's first right to counsel program for indigent tenants during eviction proceedings. This right to counsel also extends to undocumented people in our state. We will have a chance to hear from Edmund directly in this next video.
According to the U.S. Census Pulse survey, it's been anywhere between 150,000 to 200,000 Washington residents are behind on their rent. Our homelessness system cannot handle 150 to 200,000 households being evicted. COVID really exacerbated a lot of the housing problems that we were having beforehand. Around mid-March, finally the governor instituted a moratorium. Primarily, it stops people from being evicted for not paying their rent. And so without the moratorium, it's quite likely we would have seen a lot of people who have lost their homes.
But it won't last forever. Right now, most of them from the federal, state, municipal level extend through June 30th. While tenants are protected from homelessness or having to go to crowded emergency shelters during a pandemic, that rent debt is still accruing. Where we're at right now is trying to get rental assistance into the hands of tenants that need that.
There is a lot of rental assistance out there that's sort of coming through, but it's frankly, if you are a tenant right now and you're trying to get rental help, there is not a dollar really to be found for the most part in this county. It's going to be probably even another month from today where you're actually really going to see people have access to needed resources.
So there is a gap between the moratoria in effect and then when federal funding for rental assistance is approved and when that actually reaches the tenants or landlords' hands.
You know, I think it would be unfortunate if we lift the moratorium before we're ready for it. But what you don't want to happen is come July 1st, you have tenants going into court who are saying, I'm behind on my rent a little bit, and I know there's money out there, but I don't know how to get it. And then the court is forced to evict them. Right now, our system is already overwhelmed based on 11,000 individuals being homeless. If you add a couple thousand households, which could be 2 to 3 people per household, that is quickly going to overwhelm the homelessness system. We will have an exacerbated problem. Well, that's just going to be catastrophic. The Housing Justice Project is a critical part of the solution.
So the Housing Justice Project, we are a pro bono legal aid clinic that provides eviction defense.
So our role is basically being that sort of advocate for people who are on the precipice of homelessness. And if you are a tenant who does need assistance, there's not a lot of other places to go to.
We're what's standing between a really bad homelessness crisis and the one we currently have.
Most people lose their home because they can't pay their rent, so it's unlikely they're going to be able to pay for an attorney.
90% of landlords have legal representation. 90% of tenants usually don't.
Over half the time, when just by the mere fact that we are involved in a case, we can keep somebody housed. When we are not involved in the case, the chances of that tenant being able to stay housed is less than 8% of the time. The Housing Justice Project is a very cost-effective program. There was an internal City of Seattle report that showed that it would cost about $750,000 to provide representation to tenants, whereas if they were evicted, it would cost $4.3 million to have those tenants end up in the shelter system. The math is pretty simple. It makes more sense to provide representation to be able to help tenants stay housed than it is to allow them to become homeless.
We at the Housing Justice Project, we need help so that when the rental assistance from the federal government is ready, we can get that out the door to as many households as possible.
So we need to build up the infrastructure. We have to build up the personnel to be able to help distribute the rental assistance, be able to deal with the number of people who are going to be facing eviction. That takes organizationally a lot of work. We need the capacity to be able to do that. Without the work we do, there would be a lot more people who would be homeless, a lot more people struggling with their housing, and there'd be nobody there at the court to be able to help them go through that traumatic situation.
Because it would be a tragedy if someone were made homeless because we didn't have the personnel or the capacity to get those resources to someone when they could have.
All the issues that we work on, all the things we've been preparing for the last few years to be able to really put an end to this problem is really going to be tested in the next coming months.
Now's the time. Now is the time.
Thank you, Edmund and Caitlin, for the impact you and the Housing Justice Project are having on our community. Remember to click on the Donate Now button on the top right portion of the Give Butter website, or donate directly at www.kcbf.org/donate. The Minority Law Student Scholarship Program was started in 1970 by then Bar President Bill Gates Sr. This program makes grants to our 2 local law schools, which in turn award scholarships to approximately 50 minority law students every year. We have distributed over $2.75 million since the program began over 50 years ago. This year, we will hear from 3 scholarship recipients. First, Honorable Ron Cox, retired from the Washington Court of Appeals, Division I. Second, current University of Washington law student Olivia Ortiz. And finally, recent Seattle University law graduate Valen Solomon.
My name is Valen Solomon. I went to Seattle University School of Law. I work at the Housing Justice Project.
I'm Olivia Ortiz. I'm from Mesa, Arizona. I moved to Chicago to go to the University of Chicago for my undergraduate degree in linguistics.
I was born in Philadelphia, and at the age of 2, my family moved to Hawaii, where I grew up. When I left Hawaii to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point, I then spent a little over 4 years in the United States Army. I decided to come here to go to law school. And the biggest factor in making that choice was the scholarship that I received from the Bar Foundation program.
But this scholarship is particularly great. It kind of allows you to get involved with lawyers in the community from similar backgrounds, and that's all been a real plus of this scholarship.
It was really exciting for me because it was a renewable scholarship that the University of Washington then supplemented. And so it was not just the KCBA scholarship, but it was grounds for the University of Washington to give me a larger scholarship and other students as well. So I think systemically, something that I've noticed is that there's not only a gender pay gap, but there's also a scholarship gap. It's helped me pay for books, maintain rent, pay for my cat who supports me emotionally through law school. So it's been a really, really great opportunity, and just being able to have fewer loans to pay back after graduating is really, really a gift.
I think I was one of the first recipients of the Bar Foundation scholarship. I know for me, I would not have had the opportunities that I have been privileged enough to experience. It was joyous to have that coming through to at least answer some of the financial challenges was just a great thing to happen.
I think the scholarship is important to the community because it sends a great message that KCBA is welcoming to minority students like myself, and I think it offers a great opportunity for minority students to both get involved in KCBA and the work that they're doing in the community, but also to be able to make law school a little bit more affordable.
It's really important for attorneys to invest in students of color for 2 reasons. First, because students of color face significant barriers to their educations, including financial barriers. Secondly, it signals to students of color that these attorneys want them as part of the King County legal community.
Well, I hope as far as the Bar Foundation is concerned that it will continue to do the very, very important work that it has done over the years. And will continue to receive the financial and other support that the legal community has provided over the years. I'm extremely grateful for the scholarship that I received so many years ago. I wouldn't be sitting here today. I wouldn't have had the opportunities as a lawyer or judge without that.
Thank you, Judge Cox, Olivia, and Valen. We will now hear from John McKay, the King County Bar Association president.
I'm John McKay, president of the King County Bar Association. Thank you for attending this virtual Breakfast with Champions. For over 20 years, the King County Bar Foundation, through this breakfast, has raised over $2.75 million in scholarships for law students of color at both the University of Washington and Seattle University law schools. More than 5,000 low-income people were helped by KCBA neighborhood legal clinics this year alone, with over 450 family law matters since the start of the quarantine. These include many seeking long-term protection orders. And altogether this year, nearly 10,000 pro bono clients were assisted with your help and your donations. But our Housing Justice Project is preparing for a tsunami of cases. When the eviction moratorium is lifted, the scourge of this global pandemic will strike close to home, here, among the most vulnerable. At KCBA and KCBF, we do two things with your help and contributions. We advance much-needed diversity in our profession through law student scholarships, and we do pro bono where it's most needed, right here in our community. Please click on the button in this program and donate what you can right now. $2,500 will provide one of our minority law student scholarships. $1,200 pays the rent of a family at risk from eviction for one whole month. And $400 covers the legal costs of a protection order for a domestic violence client. With all that is facing our community during these times, please give more right here at the Breakfast with Champions. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Fred Rivera. I'm Executive Vice President and General Counsel of the Seattle Mariners and a trustee on the King County Bar Foundation. Thank you for attending this morning's Breakfast with Champions. It's my honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Bob Bauer. I don't think it's hyperbole or an exaggeration to call Bob one of the most important and significant lawyers in our generation. Bob has a long and deep resume, and I won't even attempt to go through all of his accomplishments, but let me highlight just a few. First, Bob has been general counsel for a presidential campaign for at least the last 30 years. That includes the 2008 and 2012 campaigns of former President Barack Obama. Bob was White House counsel for President Obama from 2008 to 2011. In 2013, President Obama appointed Bob to co-chair a bipartisan commission reviewing election problems, resulting in a seminal report published in 2014. More recently, Bob has supported President Biden's campaign and in other ways. He led the vetting process for the vice president, which resulted in the selection of Vice President Harris. He supported President Biden in debate preparation. I'm even told that he played the role of former President Trump, which doesn't surprise me given how he looks like Alec Baldwin from time to time. Bob and I were partners for over 10 years at the Perkins Coie law firm. And I have to say he influenced me in many ways, but I want to highlight at least two that you won't find on his Wikipedia page. First, Bob is a grammarian. He loves the English language, and he writes with absolute precision. If you've ever received an email from Bob, you know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, every time I try to use a colon or subcolon, I think, what would Bob do? Second, Bob is absolutely committed to diversity and inclusion, and he has been before DE&I were common words in business and the law firm environment. I recall in the late 1990s when Bob was involved in our law firm management, he was the primary author of a strategic document for the law firm. He identified diversity as a primary strategy for the firm, and he even went so far as to say that Perkins Coie should be second to none when it comes to diversity. About 12 years later, I was appointed as the first person of color to be a managing partner of the Seattle office of Perkins Coie, and I know that Bob had much to do with it. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce my former partner and my friend, Bob Bauer.
Thank you very much, Fred. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you, and I'm very grateful for the invitation. As you know, I left Perkins Coie in 2018 to begin what I thought turned out to be somewhat interrupted an academic career, which I've resumed. But I was there for just shy of 40 years, and I came to know the legal community in Washington State and in King County in particular very well. and have the highest regard for programs like the ones that you have been discussing today. I remember, in fact, that part of the world so well because I flew in and out of it often enough that not long ago I thought, finally, I've consumed as much coffee on the East Coast as I used to consume flying in and out of SeaTac. But what I want to talk about today is how I've come to think about, as a result of my government experience and my involvement in politics, the extraordinarily important role that we have to continually reconsider and refresh of lawyers in public life. And no association that I'm aware of has committed itself more to these conversations than the King County Bar Association. I began the practice at Perkins Coie in 1981. It was called the Political Law Group. It still is. And the goal there was to assist clients in achieving their political goals, whether it was to win an election or to successfully speak out on issues, and to do so in a manner that complied with the law. And then I took time out for various stints in government service. I was outside counsel to the Senate caucus in the impeachment trial of Bill Clinton. I became White House counsel, as Fred said, under President Obama. And in the course of thinking about what I was doing professionally, both inside and outside of government, I thought there was much more to be done, to be said, to be discussed on a fully nonpartisan basis about the role of lawyers. And when I began to teach, first part-time and then full-time at New York University Law School, well, I taught a number of courses like presidential power and political reform. My baby, if you will, the one that I devised, wrote up a curriculum for and have taught ever since, is entitled The Role of the Lawyer in Public Life. And in that course, what I do is I focus to some extent, not entirely, but focus on Rule 2.1 of the Model Code of Professional Responsibility. And I want to read it. It's entitled Counselor, and it says in full, in representing a client, a lawyer shall exercise independent professional judgment and render candid advice. In rendering advice, a lawyer may refer not only to law, but to other considerations such as moral, economic, social, and political factors that may be relevant to the client's situation. In other words, a lawyer has to be mindful that while they must always be zealously representing the interests of the clients within the canons, but to the best of their professional ability, they have an obligation to all those who are affected by the way that representation is conducted. And that includes the government lawyer that represents the people of the United States, not just the political people who gave that lawyer the job, or the lawyer who is also a lobbyist, who is not only representing a client with a particular public policy objective, but representing a client whose success or failure will have an impact on many outside the boundaries of that representation, or the lawyer who is a legislative investigator, who advises legislators on how to conduct hearings, what information to develop and put forward to the public is reliable, and on the basis of which public policy is formed. Or what I call the cause lawyer, a lawyer who represents a client who has a very distinct interest that requires representation, but the client and the lawyer have agreed that they're also advancing a larger goal. They want to put a cause before the public. They want to litigate toward a particular result that will reverberate well beyond the specific interests of that particular client. And in all those circumstances, Rule 2.1 becomes very significant. How does the lawyer think about not just what it takes for the client to be successfully represented on the legal issues, but what other factors, political, moral, economic factors, social factors, ought to be brought to bear in the advice given to the client and in the way that the representation is shaped. In the course that I teach, we use case studies. We talk about recent controversies around the Attorney General's position in the US government or the White House counsel. We talk about specific cause lawyering issues. We talk about a whole range of public matters in which lawyers have played a central role, and how they conduct themselves professionally makes an extraordinary difference to whether or not they've really stood up to, risen to the challenge of Rule 2.1. Now, in recent years, in my judgment, these questions have become all the more urgent. We've had controversies, not just in the last 4 years, and certainly those were very heated and momentous, but also in the years leading up to the Trump presidency. And so I don't want to make this a political point. I want to make this a broad point of how, in an age of polarization, lawyers conduct themselves in a way that honors the role that they have played in our democratic society. These are not all easy issues, but certainly we have seen in recent years examples where lawyers in positions, very prominent positions of public responsibility, have let us down, have let the profession down, and have let the public down. And the question was whether they lack the guidance or they lack the moral fortitude to do what it is that we want lawyers in those circumstances to do. Sometimes the arguments over these cases are clearly tinged by partisan preference. It's easy for one side to defend their lawyer and to attack the lawyer on the other side, to assume the best about their own team and to assume the worst about the other. But in other cases, and I think we saw this after the 2020 election, and as somebody who was very much involved in those controversies, I saw it up close, tried to retain my objectivity, but must say that we saw in many respects both the best and the worst that our profession has to offer when lawyers are functioning in this critical public space. We saw some lawyers who on the bench and elsewhere really stood up to a toxic environment in which the very values of the democracy were at stake. And we saw other lawyers who simply did not stand up to that. And they basically threw their lot in with a particular side and a particular set of claims that as lawyers, we would not have expected them to associate themselves with. And nothing was, I think, more sharply illustrated by that than the number of times that we saw lawyers saying one thing outside the courthouse and something very different directly to a judge. Now, what are the factors that I think we need to look at, the pressures that are building to this very difficult set of circumstances in our profession, this challenge that our profession has to meet? Well, certainly it's a background concern that I have that we see entering into the political arena, but I think we see it everywhere. And that is deeply rooted in our cultural assumptions about what it means to be successful. What it means to be a lawyer doesn't necessarily mean, as some might think, to make the most money, to bill the most hours, to bill at the highest rate. And the competition of lawyers to be successful on certain metrics that are purely economic metrics can significantly overwhelm, as we all know, their responsibilities and their willingness and ability and aptitude for applying the standards that are set out in our canons. But the second, and I mentioned this a minute ago, is polarization. Now, we're in a deeply polarized country, and lawyers sort into political camps. They have their own views. They vote the way that their conscience dictates that they vote, their political allegiance dictates that they vote. And it is very important for lawyers, as I think we all understand, to be a civilizing and moderating and democratic voice, and not simply one of the loud partisan voices that we hear. And so it's important for lawyers to find every opportunity to bridge divides and to agree that we have a larger role in a democratic society, a role that goes well beyond what each of us are fully entitled to be committed to as voters or as political participants, but critical above all is that we retain that sense of what we owe the public as lawyers. After the election was over, I had the privilege of writing about reform of the presidency with a co-author, Jack Goldsmith at Harvard. The book was entitled After Trump, Reconstructing the Presidency. And there it was an attempt to put forward a nonpartisan program of institutional reform that Democrats and Republicans or independents, people of any political persuasion and viewpoint could support. That's urgent work, particularly in those parts of the book where we discuss the legal profession. We talk about the importance of the Department of Justice as a font of independent enforcement, depoliticized enforcement of the law, or the particular role that lawyers to the president and lawyers to other senior executive branch officials play. And what we discuss there is something that I think applies as well and as forcefully to lawyers at the state and local level in government and in politics as well. So this is urgent work, and I think it needs to continue. And I think it needs to continue on a bipartisan basis, because if we are not, as lawyers, whatever our political backgrounds, committed to these ideals, to the sort of considerations we're called upon to bring to bear in our representation reflected in 2.1, then we are dishonoring our profession and not doing what I think traditionally in this country, committed as it is to the rule of law, our fellow citizens expect from us. I want to say a few final words about the King County Bar Association. I was reminded again of its extraordinary origins. lawyers coming together to defend against an outrageous attack on Chinese immigrants in the community, an attack that some lawyers joined in to detain them, to, quote, send them back where they came from, close quote, effectively kidnapping them and putting them on a boat. And lawyers of good conscience who understood what our democracy was about rallied to stop it. There was loss of life, but eventually, successfully, this lawless venture was stopped. And the King County Bar Association, I understand, originated in an attempt of the lawyers of good conscience who understood what their profession required of them to come together and to censure, to seek the suspension from law practice of the lawyers who were involved in this grotesque dishonoring of their professional licenses. And so I'm speaking to an association that understands very well what I'm talking about, and I'm grateful to be here. I want to close actually by quoting somebody else whom I happen to know very well, a partner of mine for many years at Perkins Coie and a former president of your association, Harry Schneider. I believe he was president from 2018 to 2019, one of the finest lawyers and one of the finest people I've ever known. In his address to the association, I believe it was his inaugural address, forgive me if I'm wrong, Harry said a few things that I would like very much to just repeat here. That lawyers do have, and I quote, a unique and important role in our society. And he goes on to say, a nation that prides itself on adherence to the rule of law is nothing without lawyers. And I think that is clearly true. And he goes on to say that this bar association has committed itself, as bar associations throughout the country must, to lawyers supporting civil discourse, promoting inclusion, acceptance, and greater diversity in our profession, ensuring access to justice for those without means who would otherwise be unrepresented, and to support our independent judiciary charged with considerable responsibility to decide important questions of liberty while dispensing justice equally and without favor. There's no way in the world that I could have said it better than myself. And so I wanted to close with those words of someone who used to lead your association and who I know represents the values that you hold dear. So with that, I will end. Thank you for all you have done. Thank you for all you represent in our democratic society. And thank you for all you're going to do to contribute to this urgent work ahead. Many thanks for having me, and back to you.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Bob. Thank you to everyone who has already donated. If you have not done so already, remember to click on the Donate Now button on the Give Butter website. The link will be active for the next 24 hours. After that, you can donate at www.kcbf.org/donate. Thank you to our inspiring speakers and to our sponsors, trustees, volunteers, and staff at the King County Bar Association for playing your part in our celebration of champions. And finally, a big thank you to all of you for attending this morning and for donating generously. Have a great day, and we'll see you next year.